Too bad we couldn't sing because I would bust out a song right now. But
Well, I can sing, just not well.
oh, you can?
Not well.
Oh,
We'd lose every subscriber.
I sing really well when I'm driving by myself.
What's up, everyone? This is
Welcome to
episode 22.
episode, what is it, 22?
22.
Well, we have failed miserably for a lot of months, but we'll get back on the swing of things, I think. Eric is probably checked out for the winter because he's on the road. Left Alaska a week ago. I think the last post I saw on Instagram, they were in Minnesota.
That's where I saw you.
I think he'll be checked out just because he's out exploring, doing some cool stuff. His wife, Christy, she's been putting up lots of stories, so you get to see where they're going. And I think they went through, well, I sent them through Jasper just because Jasper's really cool. And then it's easy to get to when you drive out of here. And then they went to Theodore Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota, which would be super cool. I've never been there, but it looked kind of cool. I think if you catch it at the right time, it's cool.
Yeah, and there's a little town called Medora, and they actually, I don't know if they still do it after COVID, but pre-COVID, they would do these little musicals. So if you're in town, you can stop in and watch a musical and then head out.
Really? A musical?
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Hey, I got a little bit of news for you. So, remember when I bought this cage for the 15 and it had all these fancy handles and everything on it? And then you and I tried to cram the 14 into it and we got it stuck in here.
Yeah.
But the 15 fits perfectly. I'm like, surely they didn't change it from the 16 to the 15. So I tried to cram the 16 in here. Doesn't work.
No.
How frustrating is that? I mean, this fancy, I don't know, it was $120, but
still,
I mean, that's a lot. And you got all the handles in it. Is pretty cool. But if they change the form factor by millimeters every year, it's like so frustrating because this stuff becomes obsolete.
So can you buy just the little frame or whatever that case is without the handles, or do you have to buy it like the whole new accessory?
I guess that's probably worth checking out because although I've bought it and I've never used the whole damn thing, so I don't know if it's worth it or not. I guess we should put a link into it so people can see if they're not watching on YouTube. And I should have probably had the other stuff ready, but you and I bought it for a shoot, and I don't remember what it was, but I was thinking we were going to have to do it was a professional commercial shoot, and they wanted lots of social media, and I thought, well, it's probably best just to do it on the phone just because that's where it's going to go anyway. And that's why we bought it, but I've really not used it.
Yeah, we shot it on the Pocket because that Pocket will do vertical.
That thing is the bomb. I've not used mine in a while.
Yeah.
But that thing, I love that thing.
I use it so much. I had a commercial shoot, and I was able to strap it on the side. It was a big bucket truck, and so they have those boom arms that come out. And I was able to strap it on the boom arm, so you got like a nice long, instead of having them out like a rail or a carbon arm, these giant steel arms that don't shake. And so we mounted it to the end of it and then put it on a suspension. It's called a Movi, M-O-V-I. And it's an arm that has a suspension on the end of it. It's built for the Pocket 3. And then we put the Pocket 3 out there. And so I have some nice footage from the bucket truck, like the whole cab and everything. And it worked out really well. And that Osmo, I'd rather lose that Osmo than a mirrorless. So it worked out really well.
Yeah, cost-wise, but the qualities, I mean, for what it's ultimately going to be used for, it's great, right? Especially if you got really pretty light.
We're going to use 5 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like you're doing a whole interview on it. Although doing stuff for YouTube on it, I think is just fine. Now, one thing I'm still working on that Mooseman documentary. So I would be out with them and I didn't carry a DSLR. I was just carrying the Red, and then I would carry the Pocket. And if we got held up somewhere where we're just waiting, maybe a bull was sleeping or whatever, we had downtime, I would just pull out the Pocket and I would just start asking them questions. I'd put the microphones on them and then have the camera. Yeah, I don't like the look of it when you're just sitting there trying to do a stationary interview because you're floating a little bit just because you can't be rock steady. I found that if I had an armrest, like if I would put my backpack in front of me and just lay my forearms on the backpack, it was much better to watch. If you're just standing there freehand trying to do it, I wasn't that impressed with it. But I mean, it's an easy fix. And the thing I figured is we're not probably going to use that footage anyways. We're going to cover that footage. The most important thing we had to get was the audio. So I wasn't too worried about it. And even if we did have to use a little bit, it'll be fine.
I think because it's set up for like that YouTube vlogger light vlogging, we'll call it. It's that weird I don't know what the exact focal length is. I'll put it in the video right here, but they give you a wide angle lens and it does a little bit, but it's that weird angle. We mounted it on a car and we're trying to do chase videos. You have to get really, really close to the car. There's a lot of distortion, so you get some barrel distortion. If you're in a jam, it works.
For all the
But
people that don't know, what's a chase video?
oh, I'm sorry. So we were filming from one car, and we had a camera car, and then there was another car in front of us that we were trying to film. And so we were testing it with that system. We were trying to test that blade arm system. We had to get really close to the car we were trying to photograph in the camera car, which brings its own problems, right? Because you're usually on a highway or somewhere where you're trying to do this. And the
It's
reason
not a
what you're trying
closed
to
course.
no, and what you're trying to solve is, like, you don't wanna be hanging out the back of a trunk or like, when we do slow rollers for the that Shift magazine that I shoot for, we tether up and we hook in. That way, if we can't fall out of the vehicle. So when you're doing highway speeds, we were trying to figure out another way to do that, and we were trying to use this Pocket 3 for that kinda gap.
Mhm.
And it worked really well, minus the fact you had to get really close. But, I mean, you could use everything from your phone or an iPad to control the video, and that's really awesome to have it in there. We ran a USB cord into the car, and so you had constant power. So it worked pretty well. And that blade arm, I keep saying it's blade arm, it's a suspension arm. I think it's like $200 versus a $2,000 like tilt-a-hydra arm. And so it's a pretty easy way to get into that type of film. And I'm actually going to use it in a few things when we're out in the Jeep or the truck, where I think it'd be a really cool shot to have it on the hood or the side of the vehicle and then shoot back through the windshield. And because that Osmo has those lobs, we could then talk to it. It's just a different shot that you don't always see. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a Hollywood shot. Hey, while we're doing that, let's just talk a little bit about that because occasionally we talk about cars, and occasionally you'll see cars on our Instagram or anything that we put up there. And I just wanted to get into a little bit about, truth and legend. We focus a lot on wildlife because we both love doing wildlife, but in reality, a lot of times that doesn't pay all the bills. It pays some of the bills, especially when you're able to do some of the big um, BBC style jobs. But since that's been lacking over the last year, there's a lot of the corporate things that fill in. So I think maybe you could speak to all the variety of different kinds of photography and video clients that you work for. Cause I don't even know if anybody knows that you shoot for a magazine for car stuff, but the car stuff, that kind of car stuff really plays into some of the commercial or corporate industrial stuff that we've been doing, or that mostly you've been doing, but I help a little bit. So, I mean, I don't know if you have a good little like elevator speech as to that kind of stuff, but it just would bring everything up to speed as to what's going on with us now, but also why there's kind of a variety on the channel.
I wanted to get into freelancing. And so I took every job that I could. And so I was doing everything from bar mitzvahs and birthday parties to family photos to corporate events. I ended up, and I still do well, I don't do birthdays and bar mitzvahs or weddings. I do family photos. And then I also do a lot of events this year. I've taken a ton of event photos this year. Um, a lot of those aren't videos right now. So I've done all of that is stills. I do video for industrial stuff. So Michael and I filmed, I don't know, we had a drone in the air with a helicopter. We did a bunch of industrial shoots. So, oh, I lost my light.
Oh no. And we learned a lot about lighting.
We'll see if it works.
Okay, go ahead.
Your internet's kind of patchy today, isn't it?
Mine is?
Yeah.
Is it?
It says you're 99% uploaded, so I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's
Okay.
freaking cold up here. Maybe it's just stuck like it's like the viscosity of the oil is slowing down.
The viscosity of the bandwidth.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah,
if
the
that's how that
viscosity of the
works.
bandwidth is sucking eggs right now.
Yeah. Let's see. So where was? Oh, so we do a lot of industrial stuff. That's photos, videos. That's the whole thing. Both of us are Part 107 pilots, so we do have drones in the air for a lot of that. And then I also shoot for a magazine here in Colorado called Shift Magazine, which is a Colorado cars and coffee magazine that got started, and it's really grown. We do press vehicles for, well, we just had that leads into something I have done here recently. We had the Toyota Prius, the brand new one out here. We road tested that. We did a big photo shoot with that. the same time, Stellantis, which is Dodge, they sent the new, I'm going to mess this up. It's the new Hornet. And there was a whole track package moniker after it that I can't remember, to be honest. Am I missing anything, Michael? And then I do wildlife just to keep my sanity right now because it's peaceful. I've been doing a lot more of that here in the past few months.
Yeah, it ebbs and flows. So when you get busy, wildlife takes a back seat. But when it's not busy, that's when you can get out there and shoot whatever.
Yeah.
No, I think that covers it. And that just, that way, when you hear us allude to this rando shoot or thing, we do it all. In fact, we do so much that I get a little worried when I send a portfolio off to a client or to a prospective client, and I think, maybe we shouldn't put this huge of a variety in there, because if they're looking for something specific, at least in the old days, they would say, you're pretty much a generalist. We don't think you can capture this particular whatever as good as somebody that just shoots that. And I would say there's some truth to that, because when I used to shoot golf, I would shoot with a guy who shot for Sports Illustrated, and I was always the second shooter on the shoot, which was great because there's no pressure. If you can go on and be the second shooter, that is like the best, because there's no pressure on you. You're just off to the side poaching all the images, and it's very editorial, but sometimes I'm shooting not as much editorial. It's all the setup stuff, but it gave the client a chance to have the setup shots, but then this really cool editorial. A lot of times with golf, the best shots come after they've hit the ball or after the ball goes in the cup. It's the reaction, right? And I just get tons of those. And so they loved having two shooters on for that. That guy definitely knew his stuff when it came to golf. If they'd have wanted me to set it up, I don't golf. So I would have probably done some really dumb stuff. It may be cool looking, but it might not be appropriate for advertising a particular ball or club or clothing or whatever. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
so,
I
but
think
I
there's
think
certain
nowadays,
niches like fashion. That's
oh, go
another
ahead.
one where you probably
Yeah,
should shoot fashion if we could cover it, but we wouldn't do a good job with it. So,
it would take some practice. I think you could
mhm.
do it. And I think nowadays the cameras are so awesome and you get the feedback immediately that you're not going to nail it. And it might take you a year or two to get really good at it, but you could do it if you wanted to do it faster than what you used to be able to do it. But nowadays, I think you or clients are more tolerant of a wide variety, because it just gives them so much more too, right? Because it's not only do you get, you just get a variety of stuff. You're not just locked into this long lens portraity kind of thing. You're getting everything. So, but I've fought with that, trying to figure out what's the best portfolio, or do you create individual portfolios for every prospective client that you go after? And I've chose, nah, just make them all really good. You can't put up a substandard image, but show the variety. If you look at our portfolio on Truth and Legend, it's everything from cowboys to cars to electrical work to wildlife and lots of sports. I think it's nice to have that range.
Yeah, so I shot for Bolero, the bowling company. So they
Bolero.
it used to be AMC, and now Lucky Strike and Boleros are that's what they're pivoting into. If anyone hasn't been into a Bolero, it is your typical bowling alley arcade where they have bright neon lights, neon signs on the wall. The bowling alley is really dark. They had a family fun event that they wanted covered from an event side. And having that instant feedback from the mirrorless was super helpful, because your white balance would change from each lane, because whether they had a red light or a blue light, it's almost like shooting a concert, right? Because you have these lights, then they're changing. Then they have TVs in the background that are playing music videos, but then other TVs, they're all big projectors that are projecting a lot of light. They have sports on one side, so you get like very natural broadcast color on a sports game, to a very creative flashing light strobe effect from a music video, to then these neon lights on the ceiling. So having that instant feedback was pretty helpful. I had
So
to
what do you
shoot.
do? Do you as you
Oh,
notice
man.
this white balance changing on every lane, are you adjusting in the camera or you're like, "Ah, I'll just do it in post?"
I try not to do it in post because I've noticed with the Sonys, I don't know how the Canon does, but with the Sonys, if you don't get the white balance close, it changes it. I don't know. It doesn't look as good. And I've noticed some distortion and noise being introduced on like the artifacting on the edges. So like your chromatic aberrations show up a little bit more and stuff like that, which in a neon area, in a neon bowling alley, are you really going to notice a chromatic
Right,
aberration?
right.
Probably not. But it manifests in like hair, like blonde hair really does it. So if there's a light that's coming from the back and kind of shining through, like there's little kids getting their face painted, right? If that light comes through and hits that blonde hair and there's some stray hairs like little kids do, this is a family event, right? This isn't models where you've perfectly groomed their hair. Those stray hairs will then turn a weird color, I've noticed with the Sony, or skin tones on the highlight side. So like the top of the cheeks where the lights are coming down, right? So all your highlight portions on the face. And so I try to get it as close as possible.
How do you
So
do
I'm
that? Because
changing.
are you just, like, guessing? Because you don't have a color temperature like, they make meters that you can meter the color.
Right.
Are you just like,
Right.
"Ah, well, I think if I just cheat, lower with artificial light," and
Well,
you're just going to 3,900 or something from 56 or
oh, so I carry a white card with me. And then,
oh, so you're actually banging it off the card. You're shooting it
well,
off
so I
the card.
cheated. Yeah. So I went there early. I asked them, hey, can I show up early? I just want to dial in a few things. They said that'd be great. Actually, we want some shots without it filled up just because we built some new things. So it kind of worked out good on both sides. So I went early in each little area. So like the arcade, I made a cheat sheet. So what the white balance was as my baseline, what the laser tag area was, what the alleys were, what the restaurant area is, because there's certain standards in a arcade. Your expectation is that effect, right? Lights and different colors. You don't want your food to be red. So your restaurant is always very neutral, 5,600 Kelvin lighting, or they try to get it as close as to that. And you don't want your chicken fingers having any neon in it. So I tried to keep that as neutral as possible. Your bar area was a little bit more with neon, but not as much. Again, you don't want your beer looking funny. And then they had I don't even know what to call it, but it's like a in between the bowling alley and the arcade. And a lot of people would gather there because they were doing giveaways there. And so I made all these little cheat sheets for all these areas. And after shooting for 4 hours, it was just a change it and be done with it type thing.
You're
On the
good about
Sony's,
that on many levels throughout prep, and I think you can't stress that
yeah,
enough. Like, you were on a
prep
shoot,
is
I think it
everything.
was yesterday, that where we were talking on the phone
Yeah.
and there was a last minute shoot. They're like, "Hey, can you show up at whatever, noon?" And you're like, "I'll be there at 10:30."
Yeah. Yeah.
So good, so good. That is such good information for other people to have. I mean, you don't wanna roll in don't do like I do, because 'cause I'm always like, "Ah, I'll figure it out. I'm a photographer, I can get this quick." But then I end up playing that catch-up game, and you definitely go in with plenty of time ahead of schedule, and it's very impressive, the amount of time
I
that you
just,
put into
yeah,
it.
thanks. Yeah, it's scary just as I do not have the experience that you do. So I'm always worried, like, if I mess this up, that's one client that I'll never hear from for sure in this world again. Now, there's a counterbalance, right? So I'm spending more time on that. So my dollar per hour goes down for those jobs. But I've always, a favorite quote that I always loved was victory loves preparation. And that's kind of how I deal with all of that. So, yeah, cheat sheets was my answer for that. And
That's good, and you
Flash,
probably do
Flash was
that
the other thing.
everywhere you go. If you have multiple sometimes you'll shoot the
Mhm.
events and it's the same situation where they'll have a lit stage for
Yeah.
a certain thing, and then that stage changes for another thing, and
Yep.
so good. That's really, um, nice to have that cheat sheet, and like you said, by the end of the day, you don't need the cheat sheet. You just know
Right.
what it's gonna be for that lighting configuration.
Well, and then that way you don't have to, because in post, what you end up doing is you forget what the venue looked like, and then you start changing colors. And if you pull too much, like they really, their brand is that vibrant lifestyle. If you pull all of that out and you kind of get it to a normal cast, that's not really what that looks like, and that's not what the client wants. So get it right on location so you don't have to do it in post and then forget about it. So
It's so much everything you want to get in post. I mean, in the camera, if you can do as little as possible in post. Hey, did you see this behind me?
doing,
Did you see this?
what is that? Is that sunlight?
The sun just hit the house.
What's It's 10:30 up there.
Yeah. So on the east side of Anchorage, there's mountains, right? So the sun technically would come up much earlier if these mountains weren't here, but and the sky's, it's light enough to see, light enough to drive, whatever. But I don't actually get sun on the house until like 10 o'clock, 10:30 this time of year. It's crazy how, I've got it all set up so that it's not so bright behind me, but now it's kind of bright. But
That's
whatever.
crazy.
I know.
10:30. So what have you been doing since you're still in Alaska? Give us an update.
Well, I did moose for as long as I could, and there's still some potential. I really got on a kick of doing urban moose. So I've been trying to do, whenever I hear about a big bunch of moose in a particular spot, I'll try to go shoot it. The whole reason is one time I did get asked by BBC if I had any. There used to be one bull here in Anchorage that would walk right down the middle of the road. This gray big bull, and he would just saunter down the road and move him from one place to another. And it was kind of on a schedule, and you could kind of predict it. I think that bull is gone, whether he died or who knows what happened. But
Yeah.
so it's not as predictable now, but so going from the fall where they're up in their traditional spots to now, I'm just kind of poaching whenever I can. I try to go find. And it's hard because you just have to have somebody that calls you and says, hey, there's a big bull over here eaten by Wells
Right.
Fargo, by the bank. You might want to come over. What they do is they find spots that have a lot of these choke cherries or,
Okay.
what are those? What are the berries that, I guess it may be choke cherries. I don't know. Some sort of,
Probably.
it's not a native plant, but it's a landscaping plant that they use in Anchorage. And it
Okay.
creates what are the things like in the yards? They're like, they're not choke cherries, but I can't think of what they are. But that's
Not much of a
generally what
plant
they're doing
person.
right now. And then now is the sheep rut. So I've been
Oh, yeah.
trying to get down and along Turnagain Arm, there's a lot of sheep on the Chugach Mountains there. It's a bit of a crapshoot because it tends to be really windy down there. And then it also
Mhm.
is, those mountains are big, so they could be way up
Yeah.
high, you're at sea level right there, so they could be up at 1,000, 2,000 feet. And it's pretty straight up and down there. So I don't do too much hiking there just because I've got a really
It's
heavy
pretty
pack.
tough. Yeah.
It's really slick and there's really steep rocks. I mean, there's places where you can get around, and I'll definitely get up there. If the conditions are perfect, I'll get up there. We've had this huge stretch of sunny skies, which is not, I don't like for sheep because the sheep are
Right.
white, and then just shooting white sheep in bright light, and
Mhm.
I just don't like the look of it. But any day that's overcast and any day where the wind is settling down, I'm down there just to see if I can find. And it's the rut, so it's kind of cool. I mean, there's a lot of interaction between males and females, but this is the time where you could potentially catch a couple of males smacking heads, which would be,
And these are doll sheep, right?
yeah, doll sheep.
Yeah.
So I'll be
That's cool.
doing that a little bit. And
Sure.
then, it's something interesting. Just a dead whale just washed up on the beach close to town, close to the city of Anchorage, or downtown Anchorage.
Huh.
So that was pretty much a spectacle. I didn't go down to look at it, but there was a lot of stuff on Instagram. And the biologists, they anchored it. Someone saw it, and then somehow the scientists got hold of that it was there. So they went and pulled a bunch of tissue samples, and I don't even know, all kinds of samples off of it. But they had to anchor it because the tide will take it away, with the
Mhm.
incoming and outgoing tides. So it stayed there for a few days. And then I guess I heard last night that they took the anchor off after they got all the tissue samples that they wanted. They're probably just trying to figure out age and possibly why it
Why?
died. But it was a fin whale.
Huh.
So
Okay.
kind of
I
interesting.
wonder I wonder how long it would have been there. I mean, it would wash away, but a lot of the larger predators that would help get rid of a lot of that are the
Yeah.
bears are probably asleep up there, right? The food has been gone
If
for
it
a
would
while,
have,
right?
every year there's whales all over Alaska that wash up because
Right.
it's just a natural process of them dying. Who knows why, but yeah. So a couple years ago, we had a whale washed up right in the middle of summer. So of course the bears
Mhm.
are on it like
Right.
big time, and it was in brown bear habitat. So it was just nothing but a bunch of brown bears.
That's pretty cool.
But it was in a really difficult place to get to. A buddy of mine had a boat, so he was able to get out there, but it was in sketchy water for a boat. So he had to have somebody constantly driving the boat. He would take a skiff to
Oh, geez.
shore and actually have someone go with him because there's so many bears. And I didn't ever go to that site, but they said it was pretty stinky. The bears absolutely loved it. You couldn't set a camera pack down because there was like blubber oil, like whale oil
Gross.
everywhere. Yeah, it didn't sound like a very pleasant, but the bears love it. They just like
Oh, sure.
lay on it and roll in it, and yeah.
High
So
fat content meat. Yeah. What's not to
if
love?
this whale would have washed up further up north where polar bears are at, then there would have
Mhm.
been polar bears on it for sure. If it would have washed up down south somewhere, there probably would have been wolves or eagles
Yep.
and that kind of stuff on it. Although the eagles aren't really going to get to much unless some sort of, you know,
Gets it open.
yeah, it's open somewhere. Which the
Right.
scientists did that because when they were cutting out the
Yeah.
tissues, it was big square plates that they were taking. So
Crazy.
yeah, this time of year, I mean, it could potentially just sit there on nothing messing with it back in the day, and who knows if the tide takes it out immediately or if it sits there for a couple of weeks. There was one in Turnagain Arm a couple of years ago that way, way down where the tides affect it, but not huge. It kind of was in a little creek and
Mhm.
it stayed there for a month. And
Really?
there'd be bears on that pretty frequently, but mostly at night, so
Yeah.
you couldn't really film it. And it was on a busy
Mhm.
highway, so you really couldn't stop. You
Right.
could hike in there, but that's not always the wise move
Not
when
with
there's lots of
yeah.
bears around.
No.
The bears out in the wilderness aren't so bad, but these bears that are closer to lots bigger
Right.
populations, I don't trust them as much. That's about it. I've been doing stuff I was just down trying to get set up for this podcast and working in the garage looking for a mount since my mount didn't work from the old camera to the new camera, and I need to spend some time organizing gear, so that's gonna be a huge project coming up, so I
I
can get
have
ready
the
for
same
next year.
issue. Look at all
Yeah,
this stuff.
yeah. But
It's a
and then
constant
I guess
battle.
the most important thing that I've been working on is the Mooseman documentary.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's it's a beast, man. There's just too much stuff, and I guess if you're in the documentary world, you end up like this because there's no script. You're not following a script. You're just telling a story, and you're hopefully telling it through somebody, asking questions and getting the right answers, and then just letting whatever happen. So you end up with tons and tons and tons of footage, and it's both DSLR and red footage. So when you have the red footage, it ends up being tons of terabytes. I think I'm up to
So
60 terabytes
okay, that's what I was gonna
for
ask you.
this one
Okay,
project.
so then, like, tell everyone, like, kinda what we've like, where you're at with all of this, because you spent most of the summer filming with them into the fall. Now you have 4 years of this? Is that right? Or is it 5?
I have 3 years of actual, like, hey, this could be a pretty interesting story.
Okay.
So I have 3 years, but I've been shooting for 4 years, shooting with them for 5 years, shooting kinda with the idea of it for 4 years, and then actually shooting specifically for it for 3 years. So, when I'm out, I'll have microphones on them, just capturing audio, because they say some really great stuff when we get into a situation.
Think of that.
Well, it's pretty exciting stuff.
Wow, breadstick.
Yeah, I know. I know. We've been hoping for
He's
him.
one of your favorites.
I know. He really is.
So Mooseman is not just one person. Mooseman is Rick and Libby, husband and wife team that film moose, and they're just infatuated by these moose. And they, we'll get into really cool. Gosh, there's so much. I don't want to give away too much of the story, but
Yeah.
and you've heard us talk about this before. They name all these bulls partly because I think mostly because it's a way to reference a particular animal. When there's me and Rick and Libby and a couple of our friends like Ray and Eric, if we say, oh, hey, there was a bull that we used to call, or he's no longer around, but his name was 22 because he had 22 points. That one year he had 22 points. And so everybody called him 22. So you could say, hey, I saw 22 at this particular spot. And that helped out. But when you get those two out there and they're working a particular bull and they're like talking back and forth, or after the shoot has gone on and after we documented this whole thing, then they just go off. They're like, did you see this? Or did you get that? Or what happened when this bull disappeared? And, they're not always shooting side by side. They might be 100 yards apart. So they're both capturing different stuff. So having that audio is really cool, but it's so hard it's hours and hours and hours of time just to go through it, just to see if you find that little nugget in there, just that little nugget of excitement or whatever. So I've got DSLR red standalone mics. So I was just it was a Zoom mic, I believe, a Zoom mic that would record internally. So every morning when we'd meet at the spot where the trailhead, I would put the mics on them and just hit record, and then it would just record. I think the rechargeables that I was using would last about 6 hours. So I'd have 6 hours of audio every day for days and days. Oh, so I have all that. And then this year, the Osmo. So whenever there was downtime, I would and those Osmo, if you guys are familiar with that little system, the mics that come with it, if you buy the Pocket 3, I don't even know, it was a kit, right? That would come with one microphone and the camera itself. And it's super slick. Those mics record internally too. So this year, sometimes I would just hit the record internally so that I'd have all that audio and that footage. But that didn't last nearly as long battery-wise. So you're kind of limited there. But all that being said, it's just a ton of stuff. So my problem now is I've got stuff split out everywhere, and my brain doesn't work well unless everything is one spot, and I can constantly know that I can go look at something if I need to reference. It's like, okay, well, I got a really good quote, but do I have footage for that? And a lot of times I like to go look for the footage to see if I've got it. And right now I've got stuff spread out on multiple drives, probably like 6 or 7 or 8 different drives. And you can't hook up that many drives to a computer at once and edit. I could get a dock and I could hook it up, but it wouldn't be fast enough to run through the editor. So I've been in the process of trying to figure out, you and I have talked not a lot, but some on the podcast about NAS drives. Those are about the only thing out there that's high capacity, but fast enough to edit from. While we both have one, the one I currently have is actually at your house, and it's almost full, so it doesn't really do any good even if I had it up here. So I think I'm going to have to get a new drive. And then I've just been dragging my feet because it's really close to Black Friday. And I'm like, gosh, maybe I could save $500 or even $300. So I'm kind of waiting right now to see. I mean, you're talking, what was I pricing? So you got to get a bunch of little external things too. If you're just buying the drives, it's a lot, but it's not everything you have to spend.
Right.
So you have to get
it was like $400 a drive, right?
Yeah, $400 a drive, and I was looking at a 5-bay system, a 5-drive system, and I think those were 12 or 16 terabyte drives.
Those are 16s, I think.
And then you got to buy the enclosure, and then you got to buy a network card that does 10 gigabytes a second, and then you hook it all up through that. That gives you the speed to edit. But then you need a switch because you got to go. I don't remember the configuration, but you got to have a switch, and then you got to have all the cables. So by the time you're all said and done, you're spending another $4,000 at least.
Right.
So I'm like, if I could save $500, and I don't have a due date for this project, so I'm thinking, okay, if I wait 2 or 3 weeks for Black Friday, then, and who knows? I may not even get a deal, so I'm just waiting, but it's not gonna make or break the project. So, but it's a real deal. I don't think if I'd have shot the whole thing in DSLR, we might be at what, 10 or 15 terabytes over
Right.
3 years.
Right.
The red is what kills it. But the red footage, you and I were talking yesterday, it just looks so good. And if you're
Yeah.
shooting the wildlife
And
stuff, why not
yep.
shoot the red? I don't do any of the interviews on red because I have an interview each year for the last 3 years with both of them. And we end up talking on camera for maybe an hour, hour and a half. So if you did an hour and a half times 2, so 3 hours a year times 3 years, that's 9 hours of red footage. That would be way
Terabytes.
too much. Yeah.
I shot an
So
interview yesterday on the red. We were doing a project. Well, it's actually one you worked on with me, but I'm trying to finish the shoot up, and we've been waiting on an interview, but we've shot everything else in red. So I was like, I'm going to shoot the interview in red just to practice. And it's a lot for one person because I was running sound and I'm trying to do focus. You're trying to talk to this person. So I like the mirrorless for interviews, unless you really need that look. But
yeah, I think interviews is almost overkill for the red for a lot of these situations. I mean, I guess if you're going to ultimately, let's say your project is going to end up on Netflix or Apple TV, I think you want to future proof that project and shoot it at 4K or 8K.
good.
And the budget is there to do it. But if you're doing the smaller corporate jobs like what you're doing, or this no paying job documentary thing, 4K or 8K. I'm shooting everything in 8K the last couple of years when it comes to the
Right.
wildlife footage or footage of them in the field, because a lot of that's pretty cool to see them working. And that's, when you shoot this document or when you edit this documentary, it's not going to be just a talking head. It's going to, you'll see them talking occasionally, but most of it's just going to get covered with footage of whatever. So you want to have the best quality there. And if you're shooting in 8K, then it gives you the ability to crop down to 4K if you want to, or you can keep the whole 8K. It doesn't really matter. So you got a lot of flexibility. But for what you're doing, yeah, you're right. But and that's probably a good little thing to get into yesterday. And I know people want to hear us talk about stills a lot, but talking about video is pretty interesting because I think more and more people are moving to video. So let's just talk about that real quickly. Like yesterday, you were telling me you shot this interview, but you're a
Right.
one-man show at that particular shoot, right? Normally, it
Right.
would be great to have 2 people, somebody to
Right.
conduct the interview, pay 100% of their attention to whoever you're interviewing. Don't deviate. Don't let your eyes leave. Don't look like you're doing something with the camera, because that person loses their train of thought. If they don't do it all the time, they don't know. They think maybe you've just checked out, and then the interview turns to crap. But kind of
Right.
take it from there and tell us what you missed.
It was a 2-camera shoot. So we had one camera with the teleprompter straight
Hold on,
on.
don't say we, say I, because it was just you. I mean, as far
Yeah.
as there were more people, but it was
I'm
you
so
doing all the work.
bad. So there's a reason I say we. So I was corporate for a long time, right? In corporate world, you're trained, because I was on the media professional side. When you're speaking, you're trained to say we, because in a corporate world, it's never I. I don't do everything in the company, right? So that's why I always say we, even though I'm a
Oh, it's way more
one-man
appropriate
show.
and very, very, yeah, it's a good practice to have. But for the purpose of this story, I just want people to understand that you're sitting there doing all this and then just run through all this
Yes.
stuff, because that was what was
Yeah.
impressive, but you missed something because of it.
Oh, I missed the best thing ever. It was an epic fail. So one camera shot the red helium straight on through a teleprompter. For those of you that don't know how those teleprompters work, there's a glass screen on the front that's at an angle. Then an iPad sits in the tray below it, mirrors itself, and then reflects back up onto that tray. The camera then shoots through the glass and you don't see the writing. When you're working with a teleprompter, the closer you get, the bigger the screen is, right? So you'll see someone reading the line. So you have to move back when you're working with teleprompters. That's important because you don't want the person, it's bad enough to see them like looking constantly with intent. It's worse to see them reading, right? So we had that set up on one. I had a boom with a microphone on the end. Typically, I like to use lav mics that would be run up a shirt or something into their sternum region, just because then you get more of the bassy tones from the chest from the audio side. But I like booms for corporate settings because people tend to want to move quickly through these settings, come in, sit down, do an interview, get out of there, right? These are executives of big companies. They want to move quickly. Their time is important. So I had the boom set up just out of frame. I have a boom, and then I had the Sony FX3 off to the side, getting another angle. The reason we use 2 camera angles is for a dynamic switch between cuts. When people are speaking, they tend to say, so, well, fill words, right? That second camera allows you to cut then back and forth. It's a seamless transition. You never know that anyone said, and you actually cut it out in the video. So we can seamlessly talk back and forth as they say, you just cut to the second camera. It's an instant win. Then I was running the audio. I forgot where the audio was going to. So the audio went from the boom down into a F8N, which is a Zoom recorder. All of that is linked to timecode. And then we had a script that we went through. We went through everything. It was great. But then I started talking to this individual, and this individual was an incredible person. They started in the field back in 2001. They worked their way up, and now he's CEO, president of the company. And it's just incredible. And so I got him talking, and this is the fail. When you're working with people, there's a creative director on location, and that's fantastic to have on location because they know what you're getting. You can check with them. They can look at framing. Everything is fantastic. But what happens when you work with people that are involved in the same corporation that have worked with those people for a while? There is things that are missed. And the reason for that most of the time is because there's an expectation of understanding, right? Where, we've talked about that before. It's not important for this. This person knows that. Whereas when I come in and I just start asking questions, I'm a new person. They have to explain it thoroughly. So we had finished this interview, and I asked them, well, can I ask you some questions, or do you have to go? I know you have a plane to catch. They go, I have to get on a plane, so go ahead and pack up. So I walked away from the camera, and I asked him how he got started and how this was working out. And he started going into this just amazing conversation of back and forth of what I just talked about. Well, I started as a lineman back in the 2001, and I worked my way up. I was hired at a bar at 4 a.m. I was trying to hitchhike to get to my job the next day, but I couldn't get there, so I showed up late, and I missed the safety. And it's just like all of this golden stuff. And there's one quote that stands out in my mind. He was talking about this gentleman, and he's like, I was talking to this guy, and he started just having this kind of emotional connection. He goes, I just want to say thank you because you believed in me more than I believed in myself. And that's the line, right? That's something you want on film. But because I'm engaged with this person, you don't want to reach over and just be like, boop, like turn it on. It's just an awkward, like it takes your connection away. They're going to shut down. So I missed it. So fail.
Yeah, and I think
So just leave the cameras running, I think, is my new
if
thing.
you're
Just
by
leave the
yourself,
cameras running.
leave the cameras running. But if you're also by yourself, I mean, if you're shooting a red, you don't necessarily want to keep the cameras running because it's just what we talked about. It's just tons and tons of data that may or may not get used. You don't know if you're going to get that nugget or not. So the best thing would have been, and it wouldn't have happened because this was such short notice, is Brandon you would have been better off to have 2 people there and someone that's 100% focused on the cameras, because anybody that would have been sitting there, well, if I'd have been sitting there and I saw that you were talking about this really rich organic stuff, of course I would have turned the camera on because you just never know.
Record. Yeah.
And those kind of stories are so much, those organic like quotes and stories are so much better than any script that any PR person is going to write.
Yep.
And it really gives you an idea of the backbone of that company or the backbone of that particular person or the determination or the structure or anything about how that company's set up. And it resonates so much better with the audience. So
Yep.
that was kind of a
Yeah.
I mean, it's just fun to talk about that kind of stuff because if anybody out there can learn from our mistakes, which we have a mistake every time, every
All the
shoot,
time.
there's always
Yeah.
something that goes wrong.
Yeah.
And it really tends to happen when there's only one person.
Yeah, and it was too much. But they called me the night before and they're like, "Hey, can you get out here?" I was like, "Yeah." And that's know your limits. We
But
got the
that
interview
happens a
filmed,
lot with
but
corporate stuff,
Mhm.
where you just get called last minute all the time, and you
Yep.
just gotta be able to do it. And you have to be proficient enough to be able to do it by yourself, which you are. So,
Yeah, I set all
now
that stuff
over the
up. I
last
timed
couple of
myself,
years.
right, 42 minutes to set everything up. I know we talked a lot about video, but I've actually shot a ton of photos here recently just because I've been out searching for bighorn because you mentioned the rut right now. Here in Denver, the rut I missed it again. Like the peak of it, the big rams were rutting 3 weeks ago, so I missed that. But I got out normal wildlife day. You get out there early. I was hiking, so hard charging right up to the top. You don't see anything, so you're like, all right, well, I'll take my time on the way out. Walking slowly out, and of course, like sun's at 11 o'clock in Colorado. It's blue sky, no, not a cloud in the air. And here's this bighorn just standing on the edge of the rock, just overlooking his kingdom. And I took a photo, so we'll throw it in here. It's a photo of a bighorn on a rock in the middle of the day. So it's not
Uh,
portfolio worthy, but it's still
mhm.
good. And
Well,
then I had been out hiking with Dean, and Dean's my son, and we found some frogs, and so we played with the frogs, and we rode our bikes around. But we found these deer, some mule deer, and it was a really interesting buck. There was 3 of them together, so they weren't quite up to the rut. This was September, and they had more of a basket, like white tail rack instead of the mule deer really wide rack that's kind of wider than it is tall at some points. And they were just really good looking bucks. And so I was up looking for them as well because we were right in that like whitetail to mule deer rut, and I didn't find them. But then I went to a different place and found some other whitetails. And actually, I met some other people that were photographing deer. And so it was nice to see you all. If you're listening, hello. It was like one of those moments where I got out early. It was supposed to snow. It wasn't snowing yet, but it was cold, and you got that like that color to the sky where it's getting ready to snow. I was just waiting, and all of a sudden one coyote starts howling, and I spot it. He was a long ways off, and I could watch him through the binoculars, and it was like one of those where he'd throw his head back, he'd howl at the moon, and then he'd stop. And pretty soon there's like 3, and then there's 4, and then there's 10. And there's coyotes everywhere just surrounding me, just howling. And it was just a cool experience. And then at the same time, there's a whitetail chasing this doe around. So there's just a lot going on. And I didn't get any of it on film, of course, but um, I did get some pictures of that buck messing around with that doe. The thing with that is I had been shooting events so much, I kind of forgot about the wildlife side. And so I had my shutter lower than it should have been. So he started running and actually messed up a few shots because he was just moving faster and he was closer to me than I just messed it up. My shutter should have been higher. He was pretty close. The closer something gets to you, the faster it moves laterally, right? So I was at 1/500. I probably should have been at 1/800 or 1/1000. I just messed it up.
that happens all the time where you just and these cameras, the modern cameras are so forgiving that you can get away
Right.
with it. But I find myself just setting it and forgetting it. It's so key to be a student of the camera and a student of the behavior and just be able to predict and say, oh, maybe I should be shooting a little bit faster, especially if you have the light. Who knows what you're going to get? And you're just constantly shifting your brain. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier is, maybe with these portfolios, someone doesn't want to see this humongous diversified portfolio because they're like, well, are you really good at one particular thing, which would speak to this, right? Because if you were shooting wildlife every day and you're shooting the same thing every day, you would predict that behavior and you would have set up your shutter speed. But with me, I don't shoot stills as much as I used to. So you kind of forget about that stuff and then you pay for it.
That was what I did here. Oh, guys, I got the most epic ground squirrel photo. He sat on the edge of a rock blue sky with a few clouds, just sitting up, just looking at his kingdom. Primo stuff here. Primo stuff.
I do want to get out and shoot some stills just because it is fun and it is all that. I did shoot stills on Moose one day this year.
Oh, yeah? Anything good?
One. Yeah, I got some really cool stuff. But it was just that one day. And then once we figured out where this bull was hanging out, and I figured he'd be there for a little bit longer, I went in with the red. This was just a scouting trip, and so I was like, I'm not going to pack the red around just to scout, but I'll take it. You don't want to go without a camera, so I took a DSLR, and I'm so glad I did. The problem here in Anchorage, and I think this problem exists everywhere, if you're carrying two systems and you're parking at trailheads or you're parking anywhere and you have to leave one of your systems in your car, the threat of that stuff being stolen is real. Yeah, the theft is real. So I'm so leery to take both systems, and I just can't find a pack big enough to carry a decent still setup and the video. Plus, I'm not strong enough to do that anyway. So, you either you gotta pick and choose, and I'm just not in the frame of mind of ever leaving anything in the car, which it's sad to say that that's the way it is, but that's the way it is. So
so when you're packing that red in, I know you have a video on your wildlife rig set up, but I think it's probably evolved. Are you packing? So are you still using the Shin, or are you using a different bag?
Yeah. Well, I have two. I have a really, really old low Pro 600W or something like that. I love it. It rides well on my back, but it's the old style where it opens in the front. And I kind of like the packs that open in the back, which is the more current style that everybody's using.
Right.
And the Shin is that. The low fits everything better, but again, it's just a little different. And the suspension on the newer packs are so much better. So yeah, and I've changed that video that I put together long ago was shooting video with the 200 to 400.
Okay.
And now I use the 60 to 600 Sigma, which I really like because it's just much bigger range.
Right.
So I can get so much more range and tell a better story with that one lens as opposed to 200 to 400. So, and it ends up being a little bit lighter, but that's it. You carry. So my pack 60 to 600 on the red with the monitor with 3 batteries and, a filter. Cause if I have to run ND, I have to have my filter, my drop-in filter that goes in that little adapter, and then some snacks and your rain gear. And this time of year, your puffy pants and your puffy coat and your gaiters. And we use these things up here called Catula ice spikes. Cause once it snows up here, it doesn't go away. It just stays cold. It's not like Colorado where, you can get 2 feet of snow and then within a couple of weeks, it's all gone. I guess in the mountains, if you go to the mountains of Colorado, that snow sticks around. But here in Anchorage, it's ice. So you really want to have something to be. And if I'm going to go hiking after the sheep, for sure, these rocks are going to be covered in ice. And so you got to have your ice spike. So it just ends up being so much stuff to carry that I can't even find a way to. I would love to have like a small DSLR with a 24 to 105, just for those situations where you find some cool wildlife where you can get big animal, big landscape, you're fairly close. And you could do that with all kinds of stuff up here, from ptarmigan to doll sheep to whatever. But I just can't even, it's sad to say, but I cannot find a spot to carry just that one little setup in my pack as it's currently configured.
Well, and you're carrying the red and lens, like it's together, right? So it's a big.
Yeah, it's all built.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have a rail and you have all that stuff, and that's what consumes all the space. And you just wouldn't want to build that camera out in the field. There's just too much to it to try to build it. And then you worried about dust or moisture or whatever getting into that whole system, and you just don't want to do it. Winter up here is pretty cool as far as a variety of stuff where, you could potentially get some river otters or some cool ducks. What's cool about it is everything freezes up, but there are little spots around where it doesn't freeze, where the water's moving. So it just consolidates all that wildlife into that one spot.
Yeah.
So the otters pop out, or the ducks are there, or ermines or minks or pine martens or lynx or whatever. And I did shoot stills when you and I were on that last project in New Mexico. I shot a lot of stills that day, which was a lot of fun. What's cool is you don't really lose. If you get away from it, you don't lose it's like riding a bike. It all comes right back to you.
I feel like I have to learn. I don't know, like with that shoot specifically, we were photographing people and then equipment and landscapes. So there's a broad range of all that, right? And I find myself, like specifically on that one with the helicopter, you and I kept debating, is it better to have the blades frozen and stopped, like all the motion stopped? Or is it better to have them in motion and like have some blur? Or is it better to just have like one big circle? But then when you tried like that one big circle, that bird is moving so fast that you got a lot of blur on it and you can't do it. And so then, I don't know. So I find myself still having to just test things.
The way I figure
lot
it with
with
like
that
a
type of stuff.
helicopter or something in the air is it's moving. So
Right.
if there's a helicopter in the air, it's pretty obvious it's in the air. So if you freeze the blades, which will give you the sharper shot, that for me is what you want.
It's the win, yeah.
But with a car, a lot of times you want that. Like you're so good at that. And the last time we shot cars together, which I haven't done that much, but I went out with you that one day and you're like, yeah, you need to run your shutter speed a lot lower. That way you see the movement. You know, the wheels can be out of focus, but if you're tracking that car, everything's going to be in sharp.
Yeah.
Except for the wheels, but that shows the movement, which is really cool.
Yeah, we were so we had we call it roller day. And so we have all these press cars on the magazine this last weekend, and we do a road that we know is mildly trafficked and we can take some time. We show up early, no one's out there. And I was shooting those rollers at 1/25 to try and get it. And so you're trying to, because you want everything else to move. And you need to keep the car constant. And this is where it's so hard because the driver of the press car or the car being photographed needs to be going the same speed as the camera car. And then you try and catch it correctly. And so it worked out okay. Light was not our friend because there were clouds. And so it'd get really bright and then it'd get really shady. And then there's snow on the ground. So you're trying to expose for the snow that's off to the sides of the road. Then the lights changing on you. So I missed a lot of shots because of that. And
that was going to be my question, because your success rate is going to be dropped dramatically, but who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, you can shoot 30 frames a
second. Just
I
need
don't
one.
know what your camera does, 20 frames a second, 30 frames a second. You just need
It's
the
30,
one.
yeah, with the A1 it's 30. Oh. Sony released the A1 too, by the way, and it's fine. It's a good if you don't have an A1 and you want a flagship camera, it's fantastic. But the highlights, they updated the grip. It's the same sensor, same processors, so it's still a dual processor. They did add the AI sensor unit that the A7R5 has, which is good. They started shipping a battery charger that actually charges too, so that's a win. But you can buy that separately, so I don't need to buy a new camera for that. This isn't going to be a big deal for people that don't photograph a lot, but they built this really nice, like soft eye cup piece. And so you don't get like that hard mark on your eyebrow, because I got a caveman brow where it just kind of like protrudes over my eyes, right? And so that soft cup will just help with comfort over a long period of time. So is all of that really worth 60? Oh, and they didn't add the global shutter that they introduced on the A9 III. That was like the big thing that I was kind of waiting for. They didn't introduce it, so it's kind of an iterative update.
I think all these things are that way right now. Everything is just like little improvement, even from the iPhone all the way up to cameras. They're just like, what else can they put in that would be that game changer thing? I'm still using EF lenses on my R5s because they're sharp. I'm like, well, other than the weight,
right? The weight is
they're the same.
Yeah, that 200 or 400 is a monster.
It's heavy. Yeah, I end up cheating a lot with the monopod because while you can shoot a handheld all you want, there's just a limit to how much you want to be lifting that up and down. Now, if you're doing it on the daily, you'd probably build the muscles to hold that up, or you would work out specifically for shooting that lens handheld. But I'm told everybody keeps talking, and I don't follow any of this, but I hear from buddies that the 200 to 500 Canon is supposed to come out. But
like an F4?
That's the hope, and that's the dream, right? If they came out with the RF 2 to 5 with the built-in extender like the 2 to 4 had,
yeah, that'd be awesome.
That would be pretty dang cool, because it's for me, the only cool thing for me on that would be the extra millimeters and then the weight. You would think that it would be a little bit lighter than my 2 to 4. But you're also talking probably
Yeah.
a $12 to $14 to $15,000 lens, and
Yeah, is it worth
I can't
that?
imagine the market for that is as huge as the market for people that want them to buy or what do they have now? They have the 1 to 500, which anybody that I know that
5,
shoots
6.
Canon has the 1 to 500. It's a float. I don't even know what it is, but it floats
Oh, like a
between
5.6, 6.3 type thing, like the
something
Sony
like
probably.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can see, and unless you actually shoot a prime and shoot, so let's say you're using my 2 to 4 f4 and you're shooting a 1 to 5, the Canon 1 to 5, and you're shooting the same subject in the same light, my tastes are always going to fall or go to the 2 to 4 because just the look of that lens, being able to go to f4 and be a constant f4, it just looks so much better than a 1 to 5 that, jumps up to whatever 7.1 or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's
At,
4.5 to 7.1.
yeah, I thought it's 7.1. So, but for most people that are just doing this as a serious hobby or a pro-am situation, it's probably fine. And most people are not that critical. And where are these images going? To Instagram. So who cares? I mean, it still is going to look good on Instagram. So you're going to save $12,000 to go on the 1 to 5 as opposed to the 2 to 5. But I think there'd be a certain market of, corporate or professional photographers that are shooting sports or corporate or whatever in the 2 to 5. The bad thing about the 2 to 5 going on a red would be neutral density. The camera that I'm using, the red camera I'm using, actually has the RF mount. Great. But then I have to run a matte box. So then there's another piece of something to carry. And it's not as versatile. Currently, I use the adapter that goes in between the red and the EF lens. So I'm going for RF to EF. And you can buy the adapter that has a filter tray in it. So I can just switch between the filters and not have to pull the camera apart or not have to carry an extra piece of ND that goes on the end of the lens. So I don't know if I would even switch if it was available. And like I said, there's nothing that competes with that 60 to 600 because you can tell a better story video wise going from 60. You can shoot your wides that give you context to where you're at. And then you can get in for your close-ups that give you the details of whatever you're shooting. And you can just tell a much better story with that lens than you can with the 2 to 5. But if you're just all wildlife or all sports, and you don't, and you're shooting lots of portraits, 2 to 5 is pretty, or birds, 2 to 5 is pretty sweet. It would
That'd be
be.
amazing. Yeah, that was like
Yeah.
my first like good zoom from Nikon was a 200 to 500, and it was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was perfect range.
Yeah, that was a very popular lens.
Yeah, the worst problem with that one is when you went to throw the barrel out, because it was an extending barrel one, it was like 3 turns, I think, or 3 half turns to get it around there. So I ended up just grabbing the end of the cover and just pulling it out like a
Push and pull.
accordion.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
probably not good for the lens, but
Mark
whatever.
Raycroft and I did a little video. He was showing how he does it because he relied on that lens big time for a long time. And
Okay.
he would hold the camera and the barrel of the lens in such a way that he could twist both. So he'd twist
Oh,
the body and the lens barrel at the same time. And he could get it without having to do like 3 different turns to hit that range.
how funny.
And I think that was the one sales point on the 2 to 6 Sony.
Oh,
That
yeah,
one it's just a half turn or
it's
it's
super snappy. Yeah, it's
yeah.
like half a turn, you get 200 to 600. That one, that's a fantastic lens. Like, anyone that wants to do wildlife with Sony, that's your lens. It's not my problem with that one is it's fantastic for wildlife when you have light. I find myself, like, in these events, if I want a close-up of a person, the stage is usually lit okay, but it's not. I'm still shooting at like 1/200 on your shutter side. I'm pushing 3200 on the ISO most of the time, and I can throw a few photos up here of what I'm talking about. But I still need more light usually, and so a 2.8 lens is usually as slow as I want to go when I'm shooting events. And
Mhm.
so Like my primary kit right now for that type of stuff is a 135 on one side, a 300 on my shoulder. So I carry one of those shoulder mounted rigs that I can drape 2 cameras or lenses off. And then I carry a little like satchel bag it doesn't have a flap. It's just where I can drop things in. And so I'll throw a 24-70 in there, and then I'll swap between the 24-70 and the 300 on that longer to wider. And that's kind of where that's kind of my sweet spot right now. For stuff that's really, really dark, I'll keep a 24-14 in my bag, but that's more like registration, food, like things where you have time to switch around. You don't want to do that with people on stage where you're going to miss something. So
You were talking about your kit. There's a buddy of mine here in Anchorage who's like this really prolific photographer who does some really great stuff.
yeah,
Because he just puts in the miles and he just gets into some of this country where he's getting stuff that nobody else is going to get because nobody's going to put in the time that this guy does. And here
right.
recently, he said he just bought, and I don't know what's different about it, but he said he just bought the new Canon 70-200. I don't know
Okay.
what it is. I don't know if it's what's better about it. I have the original 70-200 2.8, and that's what I use, but I don't know. I think this one is just maybe a lot lighter, probably a lot sharper. But he basically said that lens is going to replace his 1-5 that he used to carry. So he'll carry a
Really?
504, and he'll use that if the situation warrants it. But most of the time he was running a 1-5, and then he carries I think it's a 135, 1.4 or 1.2 or 1.8. I don't know what it is. It's a
Yep.
L series lens, but he's basically going with that, the 24-70 2.8, and then the 70-200 2.8. And
Okay.
I think today's world
super
too
tiny.
with these stills, is it tiny?
Yeah. So it's not a internal focus anymore. They have it extending, but it looks like a 24-70 when it's all closed up.
And is it 2.8 or f4?
It's a
Because I know
2.8.
they make an
And so,
f4 version that is super tiny, 70-200. Our buddy Ray
yeah,
has that, but I think he
yeah,
got the
it's a 2.8
70-200 2.8. Yeah,
and it's 2.3 pounds.
yeah. So he was telling me that I haven't seen it yet, but he was telling me the other day over text that that's his new kit, is just taking the smaller stuff. But this guy's climbing mountains and carrying all this weight, and he's just an animal. And he sends me some screenshots every now and then, and what he's getting is just way better. And I think that's with wildlife stuff, that's the preferred shots now. Anybody can get a portrait, but can you get kind of a portrait and show the habitat and make it all really work? Yeah, but you need to use the wider stuff, and you need to find animals that are tolerant of a little bit closer proximity. And just the work that he does gets him in those spots, and he's just getting really cool stuff. Yeah, I think that's the best thing about the changing of the equipment is it's going to lessen the weight, give you more ability to get further if you're like him or even like me. I mean, it's always a weight thing. And you just don't want to carry all the stuff that we used to carry if you don't have to. But there's still nothing that replaces a 600 f4 or a 500 f4 or a 300 2.8 or a 400 2.8. Those lenses are so awesome, but they're just shooting. One of my favorite things to do with those big pieces of glass is portraits, because you can just, if you've got a person that has a look and you're using the big lenses, it looks so good. That's what I used to do with the golfers all the time, is big lens and just, if you're trying to show the determination or the happy or the whatever the emotion is, or particular pieces of clothing that they're wearing on their upper body, that was always the go-to. Just because it just looks so good.
Well, if they
So,
have
so
any
good.
separation from their background, it's the background's gone.
Gone. Yeah. Yeah. All the focus is right there, which is the best.
Yeah, I'm actually working on, I guess, let me back up. So for those that are new to the photo world, the reason that the background disappears is because you're you're compressing the image, and that compression pulls that background in, but it's so far away that the hyperfocal distance, look that up, your hyperfocal distance can't be focused. That's your focus plane, and it's gone. And so it just turns into bokeh, but it's just a blurry, nice, buttery background. And so I've
Like
actually been
way,
trying to
way
figure,
blurry. Yeah, like there's no, like if you're shooting
yeah, not
trees or
like little
something,
balls or anything like that. It's just
yeah, it's just
gone.
gone. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll throw a photo up here.
You
'Cause you
should
did
throw up some
my
photos.
headshots. What I was gonna say is I'm looking for a spot downtown right now to use that compression, because I have an R32 Skyline for those car nerds. It's like a JDM Japanese car that's imported into the US. So you drive on the right side instead of the left side. But we thought it'd be cool to have a Nissan Skyline with the Denver skyline in the background. And the only way to do that is with one of these lenses. But I think I'm going to have to stack, like a focus stack with them. Because with the testing that I've done so far, I can't get a car that's close to me in focus with the city still being in focus as well. So I think I'm going to have to just do a composite.
Yeah, but that's still cool, right? I mean, if you can
Oh, yeah,
perfect
it'll be
it
cool.
and get it done right, it'd be really awesome. And nowadays the tools are so good. The Lightrooms, the Photoshops, the ability to do that is real. And or you could just tell AI to do it for you.
Well, have you played with the new Photoshop update at all with some of
No, I never
the
use
things they put
Photoshop
in there?
anymore. I can't.
So
My brain is not big
Oh, man,
enough to
dude.
handle all the stuff that's coming at us in every direction. So I've just basically, I call
It's
you.
cool. They you call me. I don't know if that's a good idea. But within that new Photoshop update, you can remove distractions. And let's say you're shooting in San Francisco and there's a lot of overhead lines. You hit a button and it removes all the power lines. It's insane. So it's getting to be pretty cool. Useful, at least, if that's your
It's
thing.
getting to be scary is what it's getting to be, right? Which is the whole, it is cool. And you got to either embrace it or, fall off the face of the planet. But it's hard to believe anything is real nowadays. Because you get an epic shot
Yeah.
of some behavior of something going on, and people are always going to question it now because they're like, "How could you do that? How did you do that?"
Right.
You can
Yeah.
do it in the
Yeah.
camera for sure, but
Yeah.
most people are just gonna be like, "Yeah, AI did that."
Yeah, our buddy Sergius that was dealing with that on Instagram a while ago. I saw him going back and forth with commenters
Oh,
on that,
really?
on one of his with one of his eagle photos. So maybe we'll have to see if he wants to talk about that a little bit. I don't even know if that's interesting to our folks. So if that isn't something of interest for our audience, let us know in the comments, and or if there's some other topic you want us to kind of snuff out, let us know.
Well, the other thing we've been talking about doing is some sort of wildlife course that we would actually put together. No, not wildlife course, but a wildlife, either cinematography or a wildlife photography course starting with equipment, and all the a lot of what we're just talking about here, but a very pointed and a very methodical conversation that would kind of highlight the reasons behind the gear, talk about the gear, talk about some of the accessories that are helpful, and then take that all the way up into composition and that kind of stuff. And nowadays it's so easy to deliver a course. I'm thinking, man, it'd be kind of cool if we just took all that, put it in one spot, and just used all the years of experience that we have together to, I just am not sure if the interest is there. So if anybody get back to us and say, yeah, that would be worth it. And then also it's like, what's the price point? I've looked at some of them out there. I saw one guy put out a course for $15, but it was like a 2-hour, I think he just sat in front of a computer, hit record, and then just basically just talked for 2 hours and then put it out and sold it for $15, all the way up to something that's like, $499, but it's several modules and, bits that you can digest, maybe a little 20-minute thing on this. And then the next one is 20 minutes on this. And the next one is 10 minutes on this. And the next one. So you might get 10 different videos, for $400, and then you're looking at $40 a video. But if something like that might be really good, especially for that pro-am, the hobbyist all the way up to the pro-am shooter. That my concern is, though, I don't use any modern equipment. So if I did it, everybody would be like, so well, that lens is ancient. Where did that come from?
How's your pinhole camera?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Oh, that reminded me of something. Oh, remember I was talking about the Ronin last podcast? I found like a major deficiency from a one camera perspective. So it's fantastic if you're moving, you're using a gimbal. Well, in Las Vegas, I had to go out for one of these sheets. Hey, can you be there tomorrow type thing? When you're getting on a plane, you don't want to bring everything, right? I mean, look at all this stuff. Well, that's dog, but everything else behind me usually comes in the back of my truck on a shoot if I can drive there. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to go light. I'm going to use the Ronin just because I need all the moving shots and I don't want to throw a gimbal in there. And then I'll throw a Sony in. That Ronin is fantastic. It's 8K if you want it. It has good color science. I like everything about it in that regard. But we had it on a tripod. I had it on a tripod. See what you have? Now you have me second guessing my life right. We're hearing my words.
Well, I want you to get the credit for all the work that you're doing out there by yourself. I want people to think you got 20-person crew going out with you.
Yeah,
it's impressive.
Nice.
Doing what you're doing is impressive.
That'd be awesome. 20-person crew. Could have like
right?
a gaffer and lighter, audio, AC.
You
Let's
just
go.
sit back as a DP in the director's chair just with a cup of coffee and just tell people,
Right,
yeah, I want to shoot this in 10 minutes. Can you get it ready?
So I have the camera on the tripod, and there's a setting within the Ronin that turns off the gimbals and you can lock them up, and that's what I use for my interview. It was really windy on location, and it's a small footprint. It's using the same Inspire lenses, so they're small carbon fiber lenses, not very big. And even that small footprint, the wind was shaking it, and those gimbal motors do not lock off tight enough, and so you're getting like this little shutter to it, and it'll be fine. I shot it in 8K and wide, and so you could just stabilize and crop in. But what a pain in the butt to have to deal with all of that. So that's my fail on that one. But
I've been
it's all
wondering,
good.
and I haven't tried it, but like when I'm down shooting these sheep, if I have and I told you earlier it was windy where I was shooting.
Mhm.
And of course I'm on sticks and I'm using the red, so I'm using 600 millimeters, which really isn't 600 millimeters because I have a crop sensor with the S35 version of the red. I
Right.
don't even know what it comes out to be, but it's pretty great. But I've got a monitor, so I've got like a little sail on top of the camera. So if there's any wind at all, or if a truck is passing on the highway, you get that little shutter, and not shutter, you get that little shake.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I wonder if the software is good enough to take that little bitty shake out. It's got to be, right? But I haven't tried it, so I'm really curious. Can you throw that into DaVinci and just stabilize that shot? And will it take out those micro movements? Because that's all I'm getting. It's not like this really dramatic, like push and, really bad, unless you're trying to shoot in 40-mile-an-hour winds. And in that case, I don't even pull it out because it's just not worth it. But
Those little micro
with those,
jitters, no.
that's
Like
why
that,
I was like, I
it
bet
won't
it
do
can't
it.
take that out.
But the ones where it's like a gust and then it comes back, yeah, it'll fix that. But those little micro jitters, we just had to cover in with footage, which is fine. That's why you shoot. And luckily, once again, I shot that with 2 cameras, so I'll pan over to the Sony and make it easy because the Sony was not having that issue because it has stabilization on the camera or on the lens side. Sorry.
I don't even know where I would use any of this footage. It's cool, and hopefully someday down the road, BBC or Netflix or somebody calls and says, hey, have you shot doll sheep before? I'm like, yeah, here we go.
Right.
So you
Right.
want it high quality. A buddy of mine has a GSS gimbal, which is the big one that you see in front of a helicopter. And I told him, I was like, and he has it mounted on the top of his van. Certain
That's the way
times
to
he
do
keeps
it.
the mount. Yeah. So he's running a 50 to 1000. inside this gimbal, and you figure if it can sit on the front of a helicopter that has that micro vibration, and that gimbal
Yeah.
takes that out, and then a little wind is not going to bother that system sitting on top of a van. And then you also have the ability to move. So there's parts of this road where you could drive, I don't know, a quarter of a mile and just be shooting sheep. So you get the movement of the camera along with the panning of the camera to stay on the wildlife, and you get this really cool parallax. If the sheep are in the right spot. So I was like, dude,
That'd
you
be
gotta come down
awesome.
and you're talking $600,000 setup, not including the van. So there's a very select few people that actually have that ability, but I was like, it'd be cool for him to try it. And I would,
Yeah.
you'd have to have a driver and you'd have to have somebody running the camera. But the beautiful thing is you're sitting inside a warm vehicle the whole time and you're just like, hey, let's give this a go,
Right.
which would be
Well,
kind of
because I was
cool.
gonna say from a photo perspective, you don't mind the wind, or at least I don't mind the wind because it takes away a lot of that heat shimmer
I'm the
that you
only one
get.
down there shooting video. So everybody
Right.
that I see down there is shooting stills, and they're all getting great stuff all the time. And I'm like, I can't even
Yeah.
shoot. But yeah, stills don't matter. The only thing
Right.
you have to worry about is you can't be sitting in your car with the engine running and roll down the window and shoot, because you're just going to have all this heat shimmer coming right up in front of the lens. So you have to stand outside and make sure everything is equal or no heat waves.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited. And I was wondering too, we would have to watch that. So you wouldn't want the exhaust of the vehicle coming up in front. But if it's windy, it's probably going to get carried away with the wind. So you probably don't have to
Right.
worry about it. And it's a Sprinter van, so it's fairly tall. So he ought to be high enough where it might be kind of cool.
Should be far enough
I don't know.
off.
I really
Yeah.
want to go down there with it and just try it out. I don't think he has it currently. He has all the mounting structure on the top of his van now. He just doesn't have the actual unit. And I don't know how
Okay.
much of a pain in the butt it is to put that on there. It's got to be pretty dang heavy. So I would think you would need some sort of hoist. And it's not so heavy that you couldn't pick it up, because I've picked them up before, but it's just
It's
cumbersome.
awkward getting it out there,
Yeah,
right?
awkward.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't know how he does
Huh.
that, but I'll have to check into that.
Yeah, that'd be cool. You'll have to update us if that happens.
Yeah, if we
would be
do that, I'll
cool.
have to ask him if it's cool that we take some photos of the
Right.
operation.
I don't have much else. That's all my.
Well, we've sat here and jabbered for an hour and a half, so
It's
I
enough.
think that's probably it. People are probably like, would you shut up already? Well, if anybody's made
Yeah.
it this far, thank you. We just appreciate y'all listening to this. If you have any comments or questions, just put it in the show notes or put it in the comments on YouTube or comments on our website for the podcast itself. Rate the podcast. That'd be really great, because that just gets us going. Podcasts have just been dying in popularity. Well, I think a lot of people are still listening, but I just don't think that the sponsorship is there anymore for podcasts. I was listening to a podcast yesterday. We were talking about Spotify just kind of ruined it for everybody, but it's still fun to do. It's still fun to share the information, and we appreciate you listening. So check back in. We'll hopefully do this, try to do it every week or every couple of weeks
2 weeks. Yeah.
as we get time to do it, because it doesn't make money, but it is fun to talk about it, and it is fun to have the community out there. So we appreciate you listening.